Hello, welcome back to another episode of 2x, the podcast where I speak twice as fast to help you learn and grow your business twice as fast or in half as much time. I hope you're ready to be fed through the fire hose. Get ready to take some notes. Feel free to pause at any time because we are diving right in. My name is Chin and I will be your host today. Today, I wanted to do a deep dive into our last episode with Jimmy Yang, where we were talking about some of the common mistakes that first-time founders make when they're starting a business. There's a lot to unpack here, so I'll try to segment this series of 2x into a few different mini episodes. In this episode, I want to talk about the idea of the minimum viable product, or MVP for short. For those of you who are not familiar with the MVP is basically a condensed version of your product. It's also the term prototype is also thrown around to describe the MVP. The challenge is I often find that a lot of people don't approach prototyping or MVP with the right mindset. And what do I mean by that? When it comes to putting your product out into the market, there's usually a few steps in terms of doing the right research and the right validation so that you can reduce the risk before you launch your business. So first off, obviously, you're going to do what we call market research. With market research, what you're doing is it's a lot of you sitting behind a computer screen, trying to understand the potential size of your project. You'll do things like looking at market sizing, you'll look at Google keyword trends, you'll look at growth of the industry, those kind of things. The challenge with market research is it can give you an idea of the potential, but it does not help you validate actual demand. That's very different. So how do you validate demand then? We tend to move into the kind of customer discovery realm of things. In customer discovery, the idea here is you're going out, you're speaking to customers to try to really understand what is the problem, how do they articulate it, what is their love language, and also understand if your solution actually meets them where they're at. So customer discovery helps you validate some of those assumptions that you have about the business, and they help you kind of really test if you're on the right path. And then the next step up is where you actually validate actual purchase intent. Are people actually ready to buy it? Does your solution actually solve the problem? And this is where the MVP comes in. So the challenge with an MVP or a prototype is, in order to be able to validate actual usage and actual value of your product, your minimum viable product, it shouldn't just be viable, it should actually be valuable. So I like to call it minimum valuable product. So if you think about it, if you look at prototypes or mock-ups, let's say I'll give you a very rough example. So if you look at a blueprint, for example, that's a rough version of a physical prototype. A blueprint is not usable. Someone can't actually use the blueprint, but from the blueprint, they can get a rough idea of what you're trying to build. Or if you, let's say, doing a mock-up of your software or your app, the mock-up gives people the feel of the product or service. You can, through user testing, see where they're clicking, how they try to navigate through your product, but it doesn't actually tell you if your product solves their problem. So it's not actually usable, it's not reliable. A good MVP should actually be something that is actually usable, that actually delivers value and simulates the experience of your complete product as close as possible. So I'll give you a simple analogy. A car without an engine, that is a more basic version of your product, but that's not a good MVP. A better way of thinking of an MVP is, if you're trying to test and validate if people like the idea of a mode of transportation that helps you get from point A to point B in less time with less effort, instead of thinking it's a car without an engine or it's a car without a steering wheel, you're thinking, okay, what's a more simple version of a car? So maybe instead of 4 wheels, you're looking at, okay, maybe a motorcycle. Or what's simpler than a motorcycle? Maybe it's a bicycle. If it's not even a bicycle, maybe it's a skateboard, right? A skateboard will still get you from point A to point B in less time with less effort. So the idea there is, what is that simpler version of your product that can simulate the experience as much as possible? So at the end of the day, your MVP is a good MVP if Number one, it helps you validate your assumptions. And number two, if it helps you clearly communicate the value or the experience with your customer or your user. MVPs are valuable not only for the first version of your product if you're launching a new business, but also if you're an existing company, if you're looking to test new features, test new markets, or even test new products. So I'll give you a whole bunch of different examples in terms of what different kind of forms this MVP could look like. So back when I was working at the incubator Spring, we were looking to launch a new program. The program was called the 2X program, and it was basically a sales training program. And what we found is through a lot of the work that we did with our entrepreneurs, one of the common kind of pain points that a lot of entrepreneurs mention is that they lack sales training and they wanted to learn a bit more about how to increase sales and revenue for their business. And what we found is every time we tried to run a program or a workshop around the topic of sales, it tended to intimidate a lot of entrepreneurs, because I think the term sales comes with a lot of expectation around like, oh, if I'm going to focus on sales, it's very greasy. It's about pushing my customers to buy products or services that they don't want or don't need. So we said, okay, how about we test a new positioning for our program, and we call it the 2X program. And the idea is join this program, and over the course of the program, we will work with you to double the revenue in your business. And if by the end of the program, you don't successfully double your revenue, you get your full money back. So that's what we were testing with the program. So how were we to validate if there was actual demand for this program? So instead of actually going out, designing the entire program, finding the guest speakers, doing the marketing and recruiting for the program, we simply put up a landing page. So for those of you who are not familiar with a landing page is basically a simple version of your website. It can be built in your website as well, or it could just be a separate page that you have. And the idea with a landing page is it's simple, it's direct, and there is one primary call to action in the entire page. So you're not having like multiple links where people can click here and there. In the whole page, it's explaining one single thing that you're trying to get your customer to do. In our case, we were talking about the program, and all we wanted to test is we wanted to gauge if people were interested in viewing the curriculum for the program. So in the page, you would read about the program, and then you would read about the money back guarantee. We would talk about kind of what are the high level things and lessons that we would be touching on in program. And then the main call to action is if you're interested in learning more, click here to view the curriculum. So that's how we would know if there was actual demand for the program. And then what we did from there is from that landing page, we started to collect interest. And then we decided, okay, we seem to have enough interest to actually go ahead and actually build the program. And that's why we started to sign people up for the program. And only when we started to sign people up would we actually go ahead with the design, the curriculum, finding the speakers, those kind of things. So the idea here is before jumping ahead of yourself and building everything, you want to say, okay, what's a small version that will help people understand what I'm trying to do, communicate the value, and simulate that experience. The landing page in that case was one example. I'll give you another interesting example of a landing page. I know this company here in Vancouver called MuseFind, and I remember when I met Jennifer at a startup weekend, I had no idea what they were talking about, and I thought that the idea was actually a pretty simple idea that didn't have too much potential. And what was interesting is Jennifer said, hey, I am looking to connect brands out there like the Nikes, the Adidas, with influencers. And back at the time, the word influencer was a new term. I think that was back in 2014. And influencers were a new thing. There weren't really too many. Most of them were still blogging. Maybe some of them were starting to come onto Instagram. TikTok did not even really exist yet at the time. And the idea then was, she said she could create a platform where brands could find the right influencers for their market. So imagine if you are Nike looking for an influencer based in Australia who has a big following of young women between the ages of 20 to 25. How would you do that? You would go on the platform and do that. So when Jennifer pitched her idea, in the startup weekend, she ended up forming a team. And coming out of the startup weekend, all they had was a simple landing page that said, we are MuseFind, we connect your brand with the right influencer for your market. If you're interested in testing out our algorithm, reach out to us. And there was a button. And that was all her tech platform did, at least for the last for the next 6 months. So what she did then is when she actually launched her website, she started to do some promotions for it. She started to do outreach in terms of sales. She did some marketing. And when the brands, the companies would contact her, so they would come on the website, they would click the button, and then it would result in her triggering a consultation call with the company to figure out, okay, tell me more about what kind of demographics are you looking to reach? What makes a good influencer for you? And then at the end of the call, she would say, okay, give us a week. Our algorithm would go out and crawl the web and find the best influencer for you. And what was interesting there is the entire process, all of it, there was no tech involved at all. The algorithm, quote unquote, was actually all in her head. She had a very good process in terms of how to do the right research, how to find the right influencer, and then how to reach out to those influencers to get them in those partnerships with those brands. And then she would call the company back a week later and say, hey, company XYZ, based on our algorithm, here are the top 3 matches for you. Which one do you want to reach out to and work with? And then we will connect you. And they actually built their business from that landing page. I think they ended up in a place where they were making close to $25,000 in sales just off that simple landing page. And that gave them the initial traction they needed in order to go to some of the incubators and accelerators down in the States in order to prove to them that they didn't just have a crazy idea and that they had something with potential. And that's actually how they ended up raising their first round of funding as well. Now, fast forward to 2020, I think they've already sold their business if they haven't, because the last I spoke to them, they were in the process of working that up. But yeah, they raised some money, and that's how they ended up also hiring their developer as well, because most developers, developers are highly sought after talent, and most of them are not willing to quit their high-paying jobs in order to work for a risky startup. So if you can do something with this idea of a minimum viable product in order to test and prove your market before you actually launch, that helps de-risk the opportunity for a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders, be it recruiting talent, be it recruiting investors into your cause as well. So, that's one example. Besides landing pages, there are many different ways that you can also test your idea. So a workshop is another idea. A workshop is another version of an MVP. So a good friend of mine, Mike Mole, who used to run this company called, what was it? Green. I do not remember the name of the company right now. But basically, he wanted to build an app that would allow you to, kind of like an almanac, replacing blogs and whatnot. It will help you understand what plants you're growing, when to water them, when to change out the soil, or once you've harvested the plant, how do you change to a new plant? What plant grows well? What plant will replace the nutrients in the soil? Those kind of things. And he wanted to test to see if an app was the right medium. And so he said, okay, if I'm going to build an app, most of the people who use app nowadays are millennials. So he wanted to gauge and see if millennials were actually passionate about gardening. So what did he do? He ran a workshop about gardening, and he used the workshop to assess the audience to see who would be attending the workshop. And number one, the workshop helped set him up as a thought leader. Number two, it helped him validate that, yes, there were younger people in the audience that were interested in his topic. And then number three, as he started to build out his actual app, he used that audience, that community that he had built around the workshops that he ran, as his what we call a concierge audience. So he would actually select a small group of people, and he would build around them, build the features around them, and do everything for them. So he would actually come into their houses, build their gardening plots for them, and check in every week with them to understand what challenges they had with their plants, what concerns they were having, what kind of pest or plant health related issues they were running into. And that was kind of the foundation for him to build his app and platform. Oh, I remember the name for it. It's called My Green Space. I think he's since moved out of that business and moved into another business. But the idea here is, if you know what you are trying to validate, if you know what assumptions you want to test, you can design the MVP around that to ensure that you get the most out of whatever you are doing, instead of jumping to building a full product. Another good use of an MVP is video MVPs. Video is great for solutions that are highly innovative, that are ahead of its time, and it's very difficult for you to communicate what the experience is like purely by talking to someone or getting someone to read something. So Dropbox is a great example. If you remember the days before Dropbox, when you would share a file, you would do it through burning DVDs or CDs, or if you're doing it online, it would be through file sharing websites like Rapid Share, Mega Upload. And the idea of the cloud was kind of vague. A lot of kind of businesses, enterprise were using cloud, but not a lot of regular consumers and even small businesses really understood what a cloud is. So Dropbox, when they came around, the first thing that they did was they created a video. And if you haven't seen a video, go on YouTube and look it up. And basically the video just shows you a quick animation of how Dropbox would work. You would drag a file, you would drop it into a folder in your computer, and when it's dropped into your folder, it would sync automatically to all of your computers connected to the Dropbox network, or your phone, or your tablets, or whatnot. And that was a really novel idea that people couldn't quite visualize and understand. So by using a video, it really helped people see and understand how it would work. And just through their video, from releasing it, I think they got like close to 70,000 signups in 24 hours, right? And I mean, sure, the founders of Dropbox came from a place where they had a lot of credibility and influence, because some of them were former founders at PayPal. So it was easier for them to raise investment and whatnot. But at the same time, like, it really just goes to show that you don't have to build something in order to prove demand. So if you can clearly communicate, again, the value or the experience of your product or service, then it shouldn't be too difficult for you to test demand, and from there use that proof of traction or demand in order to build around your business. So build around being raising capital, hiring the right people, those kind of things. Another interesting one you can look up on YouTube is the Lily drone. And the idea of the Lily drone is instead of a regular drone that you would have to fly and pilot, it's a drone that would follow you intelligently based on a special tracker that you carry on you. So you throw it in the air, and let's say if you go paddling on the river, or if you go snowboarding or skiing, the drone will automatically follow you and capture footage, both video and pictures. And when they launched their Kickstarter project, I think they ended up raising close to 35 million in pre-orders from that video alone. I mean, that project itself it's a failed project. They couldn't actually build the tech, and a lot of their backers ended up losing the money that they put into it. But I don't want you to take that as a lesson. It's not about making false promises. Of course, you should be able to validate yourself if it's really possible. But at the end of the day, if you just want to gauge if there's demand in the market for your product or service, and if your product is really novel and it's hard to communicate through words alone, then a video can be a very effective MVP. On the video note, since we were talking about Kickstarters or crowdfunding campaigns, a crowdfunding campaign itself could also be that MVP. That the founder of Pebble, the smartwatch, which eventually got acquired by Fitbit. So Eric, he was here in Vancouver, and he was speaking about his experience. And I remember him talking about how on his Kickstarter campaign, he actually had the entire blueprint of how to build his smartwatch. And at the time, he was worried about people stealing his idea, obviously. He was worried about some of the bigger players at the time. Motorola had a smartwatch in the market. But what he found was just, if you really want to do something, don't worry so much about people copying, because there are so many other things that other competitors are busy with. And your specific idea, your specific market, your specific manifestation is probably not a priority on their radar. So Pebble, at that time, they ended up raising, I think, close to 10.5 million, one of the largest crowdfunding campaigns at its time. And when they got acquired by Fitbit, they got acquired for $23 million. So, just goes to show, like, how can you communicate, whether it's through a video or through a landing page or through a crowdfunding campaign? Those are many different ways. I'll give you a creative non-tech one. There's this grocery store here in Vancouver called Nada, and they are a zero waste grocery store. So the idea here is it's a grocery store with no packaging. You come in with your own containers. And Brianne, the founder of Nada, when she wanted to open up the store, she already knew that there was a growing appetite for this type of business in different areas because it's been done before. It's been done in Belgium, it's been done in Texas, but she wasn't sure if the Vancouver market was ready for it. So she said, hey, how can I test if people in Vancouver care enough about reducing waste and are willing to change their consumer behavior to come to a grocery store and bring their own containers and scoop things out, weigh them out, and check them out on their own. So she had a lot of things that she was uncertain about. And she said, hey, instead of leasing a location, doing a bunch of renovations, buying a whole bunch of product, which is all very risky and expensive, how can I test some of these assumptions? So she tried to build it in as lean a way as possible. And when she came through the spring programs, I think one of the first things that she ended up doing was she started a Facebook group. And the Facebook group was called Zero Waste Vancouver. So that was her first version of her MVP. And the group was primarily to see if there was enough interest in the Vancouver community around this cause. So if you notice with her group, it was called Zero Waste Vancouver, not a grocery, right? So it was a group centered around the cause, not around the business. And through the group, she ended up validating that, yes, there is a demand, because I think her group now is close to, I think more than 15,000 people last I checked. But the group actually helped her understand that, yes, there is enough interest in the market. And then number two, it also started to help her build the community that she could promote to. Because then when her store was ready, she could go back to the community that she had already started and said, hey, you know what? I'm the founder of this group. I've already started our first store. Come check us out. We'll be open, blah, 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 those kind of things. So that's how she ended up to starting that momentum and traction around getting people hyped up about her business. So the Facebook group was MVP number one for her. MVP number two was, now she understood that there was some level of interest. She wanted to actually test selling products. So what she did is she reached out to Patagonia, the clothing store, because she thought that her ideal target audience would be the same kind of people who would shop at Patagonia. And she reached out to a bunch of stores to get permission to run pop-ups with them. So for their pop-ups, she would just have a small table in the store on a weekend, and she would have a bunch of product on the table, and people could come by, check out her products, and they could buy whatever they want with their own containers. So through doing the pop-ups, it actually allowed her to do a few things. Number one, it helped her test different locations to see which neighborhoods would be better. Number two, it helped her test different products to understand which products were easiest to carry, which products had issues around packaging, containers, weighing systems, those kind of things. For example, like she found out that pasta, for example, if pasta is at a certain length, it's really difficult to find the right container to fit it. So how can we either prepackage the pasta that we have by cutting it in half or shorter lengths, or selling containers where people could easily store and purchase their pasta in. So of course reusable containers. And eventually through the pop-ups, she ended up at a stage where she was, I think, close to running a pop-up every single weekend, and she was maximizing her revenue because at any given weekend she was capped out at about close to, I think, 3,500 in revenue a weekend, simply because she did not have enough space and she did not have enough employees to sell more product. So through this, some of this initial traction allowed her to go to those banks to secure those loans, to get some investment in order to lease the location, do the renos, and then buy the products to fill up the location. Because same thing, if you're going to a bank, not just an investor, most of them want to see that you have a valid business and not just a random idea. So, the MVP can help you prove some of that traction, and it can help you have those intelligent conversations to say, hey, I've de-risked my opportunity. I'm an operational business. Are you willing to invest or lend to me? So that's another example of a great kind of minimum viable product. So just to give you a sense, before COVID times, I think her store had already broken $1 million in revenue. I'm not too sure where they are right now. But yeah, it really allowed them to really scale up their grocery store from the ground, all the way from a simple idea. I think it took them only about 5 years to get to a stage where they've broken $1 million in revenue. So many different ways that you can do it. It could even be, cold calling. So let's say, for example, another one I can think of is there's this biotech company in Vancouver called Light Integra. And what they do is they have technology that makes it possible for you to analyze blood platelets, because you might know that people have different blood types, A, B, O, RH, positive or negative. But apparently there's also active or passive platelets. And obviously, if you have active platelets, the idea is your blood is more likely to clot. So if someone is bleeding out on the operating table because of some accident, you want to give them active platelets. Versus if you don't want the blood to clot, you want to give them a transfusion that has more passive platelets. So the technology is obviously a very important technology. But they were going out trying to validate who is the right customer. Is it the hospitals? Is it the blood banks? Is it the medical labs? And for them, their MVP was cold calling. They simply picked up the phone and called a bunch of each of those different target customers. And what they found is they called the blood banks. Blood banks, they had a painful problem, but they had no budget for this kind of technology. They called the medical labs, and then they found out that medical labs have the budget, but they don't feel that it's a really painful problem because they are not working directly with people who need those transfusions. And then they decided, okay, what else can we try doing? We'll try calling private hospitals down in the US. And that's where they hit on a goal. They found out that, yes, private hospitals, they have the money and they feel the problem. So now they can focus hard on sales and really focus on that channel for their sales strategy. So how can you build or test your assumptions in a simple way, right? It doesn't have to be just for your product. It could even be just for testing different marketing channels, different sales channels. So I'll wrap it up here on the MVP topic with one simple example. If you are wondering like, hey, what should I build as an MVP for my product? One exercise you can do is think about what are some of the core features that you think need to go into your product. So features could be things like maybe it's, you need to share a profile feature. You need to have an ability to transact. Maybe you need to be able to trigger your camera, those kind of features, right? Maybe you need a chat function. Maybe you need a history function. I don't know. And then once you've outlined some of those features that you think are essential for your prototype or for your product, you want to identify what are the key core features. So if you could take that entire list of features, if you can cut out half of them, and if you could still have a working prototype, cut out those half. And you want to try to boil down to those core features. From there, you want to understand, okay, now I have certain core features. What's the value proposition behind each of those features? So for example, if you're building a dating app, the ability to have chat, one of the value proposition behind that is chat should improve matching because it allows you to get to know someone better. Or maybe if you're saying images, being able to have profile pictures, you might say, okay, images are important because we assume that people are superficial and they care about the appearance of the other party that they're trying to date. So once you understand what the value propositions behind your core features are, you want to identify what assumptions do you have that you want to test. Because let's say if you're building this app, let's say, for example, if I'm building a Tinder for seniors, for example, I'm actually building it off two very big assumptions. One is that seniors actually care about being matched. Because I don't know, maybe seniors are too old. They're not interested in dating scene anymore. Or maybe seniors are, they're looking for a fling because they've been attached their whole lives. I don't know. Or maybe seniors care about deeper connection. Depending on what you're looking for. If you think, okay, the seniors, they care more about like history, interests, shared hobbies, those kind of things. So one possible MVP to simply test this out before even building an app is, okay, based on those assumptions, what can I do in order to test if seniors actually care about being matched? So you outline, instead of focusing on the features, you outline the value proposition and you outline the underlying assumption behind that. So if seniors care about being matched, one MVP you could test is go run a speed dating event at a senior care home. If no one is interested in signing up for your speed dating event, then it invalidates it. It actually means that seniors don't even care about being matched up, right? So then you don't have to bother building an app. But obviously, if there's interest, then maybe there's more potential. And that's how you start to build your community, start to build that momentum and traction. And then eventually you can bring those people back and say, hey, you know what? Thanks for attending some of our events in the past. We now have an app. So yeah, think about how can you boil down your product or service into some core value propositions and then identify what are the underlying assumptions that you need to test because they may either make or break your business. So that's pretty much it for MVPs. I've given a whole bunch of different examples. Tune in to the next episode where I'll talk a bit more about finding co-founders and the kind of equity discussion. Right, that's it for this episode.